Instead of dancing, he was a bad dancer. Arkady chats with her during the mazurka, permeated by the happiness of being near her, talking to her, looking at her eyes, her lovely brow, all her endearing, dignified, clever face. She said little, but from some of her observations, Arkady concluded that this young woman had already contrived to feel and think a great many things. "Who was that you were standing with?" she asked him. "When Monsieur Sitnikov brought you to me." "Oh, so you noticed him?" Arkady asked in his turn. "He has a splendid face, hasn't he? He's a certain Bazarov, a friend of mine." Arkady fell to talking about this friend of his. He spoke of him in such detail and with such enthusiasm that Madame Odintsov turned toward him and gave him an attentive look. The governor came up to Madame Odintsov, announced that supper was ready, and with a careworn face offered her his arm. As she went away, she turned to give a last smile and nod to Arkady. He bowed low, followed her with his eyes. How graceful her waist seemed to him. The grayish luster of black silk apparently poured over it. "Well?" Bazarov questioned him as soon as Arkady had rejoined him in the corner. "Have a good time? A gentleman has been telling me now that this lady is my, but then the gentleman himself strikes me as very much of a fool." "Well, now, according to you, is she really my? "I don't quite understand that definition," answered Arkady. "Oh, now, what innocence." "In that case, I don't understand the gentleman you quote. Madame Odintsov is indisputably most endearing, but she behaves so coldly and austerely that—" "Still waters, you know," Bazarov put in quickly. "She's cold, you say? That's just where the taste comes in. For you like ice cream, don't you?" "Perhaps," Arkady muttered. "I can't judge about that. She wishes to make your acquaintance and asked me to bring you to see her. I can imagine how you've painted me. However, you did the right thing. Take me along, whatever she may be. Whether she's simply a provincial lioness or an emancipated woman, a la Kukshina, Eudoxia. The fact remains that she's got a pair of shoulders whose like I've not set eyes on for a long while." This is Turgenev at his best. The delicate and vivid paintbrush, that gray gloss is great. A marvelous sense of color and light and shade. The my is the famous Russian exclamation oi, 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 still preserved in New York City among Armenian, Jewish, and Greek groups stemming from Russia. Note that first revelation when the following day he is presented to her that Bazarov, the strong man, may lose his confidence. Arkady presented Bazarov and noticed with secret wonder that he seemed embarrassed, while Madame Odintsov remained perfectly tranquil. As she had been the night before, Bazarov himself was conscious of his embarrassment and was irritated by it. Of all things, frightened of a petticoat, he thought, and sprawled out in an armchair just like Sitnikov, began talking with an exaggerated unrestraint, while Madame Odintsov kept her clear eyes fixed on him. Bazarov, the confirmed plebeian, is going to fall madly in love with the aristocratic Anna. Turgenev now uses the device which is beginning to pall, the pause for a biographical sketch where the past of the young widow Anna Odintsov is described. Her marriage to Odintsov had lasted 6 years until his death. She sees the charm of Bazarov through the rough exterior. An important observation of Turgenev's part is, vulgarity alone repelled her, and no one could have accused Bazarov of vulgarity. With Bazarov and Arkady, we now visit Anna's charming country seat. They will spend a fortnight there. The estate, Nikolsko, is situated a few miles from the city, and from there Bazarov intends to travel on to his father's country place. It will be noted that he has left his microscope and other belongings at the Kirsanov place, Mariino, a little trick carefully prepared by Turgenev in order to get Bazarov back to the Kirsanovs, so as to complete the Uncle Pavel Fenichka Bazarov theme. There are some splendid little scenes in these Nikolskoy chapters, such as the appearance of Katya and the greyhound. A beautiful greyhound bitch with a blue collar on ran into the drawing room. A beautiful greyhound bitch with a blue collar on ran into the drawing room. How could I have misread that? A beautiful greyhound bitch with a blue collar on ran into the drawing room. I guess because you don't really have to say on, right? A beautiful greyhound bitch with a blue collar ran into the drawing room. Like, you don't have to say with a blue collar on, otherwise was it in its teeth, or where else would it be? Of course it's on. I think that was Nabokov's fault, not mine. A beautiful greyhound bitch with a blue collar on ran into the drawing room, tapping on the floor with her nails, immediately followed by a girl of 18, black-haired and swarthy, with a somewhat round but pleasing face and small dark eyes. She was carrying a basket filled with flowers. "And here's my Katya," said Anya, indicating her with a motion of her head. Katya made a slight curtsy, settled down beside her sister, and began sorting the flowers. When Katya spoke, she had a very endearing smile, timid and candid, and looked up from under her eyebrows with a sort of humorous severity. Everything about her still had the greenness of youth, her voice and the bloom on her whole face, and her rosy hands with the whitish circles on the palms, and her shoulders just the least bit narrow. She was constantly blushing and breathing rapidly. We now expect from Bazarov and Anna a few good conversations, and indeed we get them. Conversation number 1 in chapter 16. Quote, "Yes, that seems to surprise you. Why?" End of quote, that kind of thing. Conversation number 2 in the next chapter, and number 3 in chapter 18. In conversation number 1, Bazarov expresses the stock ideas of progressive young men of the time, and Anna is calm and elegant and languid. Notice the charming description of her aunt. Quote, "Princess K, a wizened little woman with a pinched-up face that looked like a small clenched fist, and staring malicious eyes under a gray scratch wig, came in, and scarcely bowing to the guests, she sank into a roomy, velvet-covered armchair, upon which none but she had the right to sit. Katya put a footstool under her feet. The old woman did not thank her, did not even glance at her. Her hands merely stirred under the yellow shawl, which practically covered her whole wizened body. The princess was fond of yellow. Her cap, too, had bright yellow ribbons. We had Schubert, played by Arkady's father. Now Katya plays Mozart's Fantasia in C minor. Turgenev's detailed references to music were one of the things that irritated so dreadfully his enemy Dostoevsky. Later they go botanizing. And then we pause again for some additional characterization of Anya. The doctor is a strange man, she reflects. The doctor is a strange man, she reflects. Shortly, Bazarov was horribly in love. His blood was on fire directly if he merely thought of her. He could easily have mastered his blood, but something else had gotten into him. Something he had never admitted, at which he had always jeered, at which all his pride revolted. Suddenly he would imagine that those chaste arms would one day twine about his neck, that those proud lips would respond to his kisses, those clever eyes would dwell with tenderness, yes, with tenderness, on his, and his head would start spinning, and for an instant he would forget himself, until indignation flared up in him again. He caught himself in all sorts of shameful thoughts, as though some fiend were mocking him. Sometimes it seemed to him that a change was taking place in Anna as well, that a certain something was emerging in the expression of her face, that perhaps, but at that very point he would stamp his foot or gnash his teeth and shake his fist in his own face, end of quote. I've never cared much for that gnashing and fist shaking. He decides to leave, and, quote, "She paled," end of quote. A pathetic note is introduced with the appearance of the Bazarov's old steward, whom they have sent to see if Eugene is coming at last. This is the beginning of the Bazarov family theme, which is the most successful one in the whole novel. We are now ready for conversation number 2. The summer night scene is indoors with a window playing a well-known romanticist role. "Why leave?" asked Anna, dropping her voice. He glanced at her. She had thrown back her head on the back of her easy chair and had crossed her arms bare to the elbows on her breast. She seemed paler in the light of the single lamp covered with a perforated paper shade. An ample white gown hid her completely in its soft folds. The tips of her feet, also crossed, were hardly visible. "And why stay?" Bazarov countered. Anna turned her head slightly. "You ask why? Haven't you enjoyed yourself here? Or do you think you won't be missed?" "I'm sure of it." Anna was silent a while. "You're wrong in thinking so. However, I don't believe you. You couldn't have said that seriously." Bazarov still sat immovable. "Eugene Vasilyevich, why don't you say something?" "Why? What am I to say to you? It isn't worthwhile missing people as a general thing, and surely not me. Open that window. I feel half stifled somehow." Bazarov got up and gave the window a push. It flew open noisily and suddenly. He had not expected it to open so easily. Besides, his hands were shaking. The dark, soft night peered into the room with its almost black sky, its faintly rustling leaves, and the fresh fragrance of the pure open air. "We've become such friends," Bazarov uttered in a stifled voice. "Yes, for I'd forgotten that you wished to leave." Bazarov got up. The lamp burnt dimly in the middle of the dark, fragrant, isolated room. From time to time, the blinds shook, and the insidious freshness of the night flowed in. One could hear the mysterious whisperings of that night. Anna did not stir a single limb. A secret emotion was overcoming her little by little. It was communicated to Bazarov. He suddenly became aware that he was alone with a young and lovely woman. "Where are you going?" she asked slowly. He made no answer and sank into a chair. "Wait a little," whispered Anna. Her eyes rested on Bazarov. It seemed as though she were examining him intently. He strode across the room, then suddenly went up to her, hurriedly said goodbye, squeezed her hand so that she almost cried out, and left the room. She raised her crushed fingers to her lips, breathed on them, and suddenly, impulsively getting up from her low chair, she went with rapid steps toward the door as though she wished to bring Bazarov back. Her braid came loose and like a dark snake slithered down on her shoulder. The lamp burned long in Anna's room, and for long did she sit without moving, only running her hands from time to time over her arms, nipped at by the chill of the night. Bazarov went back to his bedroom 2 hours later, his boots wet with dew. He was all muffled up and glum. In chapter 18, we have the third conversation with a passionate outburst at the end, and again the window. Anna held both her hands out before her, but Bazarov was leaning with his forehead pressed against the window pane. He was gasping, his whole body was visibly trembling. But it was not the tremor of youthful timidity. It was not the delectable dread of a first declaration of love that possessed him. It was passion struggling in him, strong and painful. Passion not unlike rancor, and perhaps akin to it. Anna became both afraid of him and sorry for him. "Eugene Vasilyevich," she said, and involuntarily there was the ring of tenderness in her voice. He turned quickly, devoured her with his eyes, and snatching both her hands, he drew her suddenly to his breast. She did not free herself from his embrace at once, but within an instant she was standing in a distant corner and watching Bazarov from there. He rushed toward her. "You have misunderstood me," she whispered hurriedly in alarm. It seemed that were he to make another step, she would scream. Bazarov bit his lips and left the room. In chapter 19, Bazarov and Kirshenov leave Nikolskoye. The arrival of Sitnikov is for comic relief, and artistically is too pat and not satisfying. We will spend now 3 days after 3 years of separation, with Bazarov's old people. Bazarov leaned out of the coach while Arkady craned his head over his companion's shoulder and caught sight on the steps of the little manor house of a tall, gaunt man with rumpled hair and a thin aquiline nose. His military coat was unbuttoned. He was standing, his legs wide apart, smoking a long pipe, and his eyes were puckered up from the sun. The horses stopped. "So you've favored us at last," said Bazarov's father, still going on smoking, though his student pipe was fairly dancing up and down in his fingers. "Come, get out, let me kiss you." He put his arms around his son. Jean, they heard a woman's trembling voice. The door was flung open, and a roly-poly, short little old woman in a white cap and a short striped jacket appeared on the threshold. She swayed, and would certainly have fallen if Bazarov had not held her up. Her plump little arms were instantly twined around his neck. Her head was pressed to his breast, and there was a complete hush. The only sound to be heard was her broken sobs. That's not me blowing my nose, that's her unbroken sobs. It is a small estate. The Bazarovs have only 22 serfs. Old Bazarov, who had served in General Kirsanov's regiment, is an old-fashioned provincial doctor, hopelessly behind the times. In their first conversation, he indulges in a pathetic monologue which bores his emancipated, nonchalant son. The mother wonders how long Eugene will stay. After 3 years, Turgenev closes the chapter with a description of Madame Bazarov's origins and mentality, a device we now know well, the biographical pause. A second conversation takes place, this between old Bazarov and Arkady. Eugene, having got up early and gone for a ramble, one wonders if he collected anything. The conversation is permeated on old Bazarov's part by Arkady's being Eugene's friend and admirer. It is this admiration of his son that the old man touchingly basks in. A third conversation takes place between Eugene and Arkady in the shade of a haystack, in which we learn a few biographical details concerning Eugene. He had lived there 2 years on end and from time to time elsewhere. His father being an army doctor, he had led a roving life. The conversation turns philosophical but ends in a slight quarrel. The real drama begins when Eugene suddenly decides to leave, even though he promises to return in a month's time. Old Bazarov, quote, after a few more moments of bravely waving his handkerchief on the steps, sank into a chair and let his head drop on his breast. He's forsaken us. He's forsaken us, he babbled. He's forsaken us. He became bored here. I'm all alone now. All alone like this. And each time he said this, he thrust out his hand with the index finger sticking up. Whereupon Irina Vlasievna drew him near and, putting her gray head close to his gray head, said, "There's no help for it, Vasya. A son is a slice off the loaf. He's like the falcon. He felt like it and he winged back to the nest. He felt like it and he winged away. But you and I are like bumps on a hollow tree, sitting side by side and never budging. Only I shall remain the same to you forever, even as you to me." Vasily Ivanovich took his hands away from his face and embraced his wife, his friend, his mate, harder than he had ever clasped her even in youth. She had consoled him in his grief. On Bazarov's whim, the two friends make a detour to Nikolskoye, where they are not expected. Having spent 4 unsatisfactory hours there, Katya remaining in her room, they go on to Mariino. 10 days later, Arkady returns to Nikolskoye. The main reason is Turgenev has to have him out of the way when the expected quarrel between Bazarov and Uncle Pavel takes place. There's no explanation why Bazarov remains. He could have conducted his simple experiments quite as successfully in the home of his parents. The theme of Bazarov and Fenichka now starts, and we have the famous scene in the lilac arbor, complete with the eavesdropping device. I like it when you talk. It's just like a little brook murmuring. Fenichka turned her head away. "How you talk," she said, running her fingers over the flowers. "And why should you listen to me? You've conversed with such clever ladies. Ah, Theodosia Nikolaevna, believe me, all the clever ladies in the world aren't worth the dimple on your little elbow." "Why, what won't you think of?" murmured Fenichka, and put her hands under her. "Then I'll tell you. I want one of those roses." Fenichka broke into laughter again and even clapped her hands. So amusing did Bazarov's request seem to her. She laughed and at the same time felt flattered. Bazarov was looking at her intently. By all means, she said at last, and bending down to the seat, began picking over the roses. Which will you have, a red or a white?" "Red, and not too large." Fenichka stretched her little neck forward and put her face close to the flower. The kerchief rolled down from her head onto her shoulders. A soft mass of dark, shining, slightly ruffled hair became visible. Wait, I want to sniff it with you, said Bazarov. He bent down and kissed her, hard on her parted lips. She was startled and thrust him back with both her hands on his breast. But her thrust was weak, and he was able to renew and prolong the kiss. There was a dry cough behind the lilac bushes. Fenichka instantaneously moved away to the other end of the seat. Pavel Petrovitch appeared, made a slight bow, and having dropped with a sort of malicious despond, "You here?" he went out of the arbor. "That was wrong of you, Eugene Vasilievich," she whispered as she went. There was a note of unfeigned reproach in her whisper. Bazarov remembered another recent scene, and he felt both shame and contemptuous annoyance. But he immediately tossed back his head, ironically congratulated himself, quote, on his formal induction into the ranks of the Lotharios, end of quote, and went on to his own room. In the duel that follows, Uncle Pavel aims directly at Bazarov and fires, but misses. Bazarov, quote, took one more step and, without taking aim, pressed the trigger. Kirsanov gave a slight start and clutched at his thigh. A thin stream of blood began to trickle down his white trousers. Bazarov flung aside his pistol and approached his antagonist. "Are you wounded?" he asked. "You have the right to call me up to the barrier," said Pavel Petrovitch. "But this wound is a trifle. According to our agreement, each of us has the right to one more shot." "Really, you'll excuse me, but that will wait till another time," answered Bazarov. And he put his arm around Kirsanov, who was beginning to turn pale. "Now I'm no longer a duelist, but a doctor, and I must examine your wound before anything else." "That's all nonsense. I don't need anyone's aid," Kirsanov declared jerkily. "And we must..." Again, he tried to pull at his mustache, but his hand failed him. His eyes rolled up, and he lost consciousness. Kirsanov slowly opened his eyes. "All I need is something to bind up this scratch, and I can reach home on foot. Or else you can send a droshky for me. The duel, if you are willing, won't be renewed. You have behaved nobly. Today, you will note." "No use raking up the past," rejoined Bazarov. "And as for the future, it's not worth racking one's head about that either, for I intend clearing out without any delay." Actually, Bazarov would have behaved still more nobly if he had coolly discharged his pistol in the air after enduring Uncle Pavel's fire. Turgenev now starts his first mopping up operation when a conversation takes place between Uncle Pavel and Fenichka, and another between Uncle Pavel and his brother. And Uncle Pavel solemnly asks Nikolay to marry Fenichka. A little moral is stressed, not very artistically. Uncle Pavel decides to go abroad. His soul is dead within him. We shall meet him for a last glimpse in the epilogue, but otherwise, Turgenev is done with him. Now, for the mopping up of the Nikolskoy theme. We move to Nikolskoy, where Katya and Arkady are sitting in the shade of an ash tree. The greyhound Fifi is there too. The light and shade are beautifully rendered. Quote, a faint breeze stirring in the leaves of the ash kept pale gold flecks of light wavering to and fro over the shady path and over Fifi's tawny back. An even shade fell upon Arkady and Katya, save that now and then a vivid streak would flare up in her hair. Both were silent, but the very way in which they were silent, in which they were sitting together, was expressive of a trustful rapprochement. Each of them seemed to be not thinking of his companion, yet secretly rejoicing at the other's proximity. Their faces, too, had changed since we saw them last. Arkady seemed calmer, Katya more animated, more spirited. Arkady is getting out and away from Bazarov's influence. The conversation is a functional one, summing up matters, giving results, stating a final situation. It is also an attempt to draw differences between Katya's character and Anya's character. It is all very weak and belated. The moment Arkady almost proposes marriage but walks away, Anna appears. A page later, Bazarov is announced. What activity! We are now going to get rid of Anna, Katya, and Arkady. The final scene is set in the arbor during another conversation between Arkady and Katya. The Bazarov-Anya couple is heard discoursing. We have sunk to the level of a comedy of manners. The overhearing device is with us. The pairing device is with us. The summing up device is with us. Arkady resumes his courtship and is accepted. Anya and Bazarov reach an understanding. Quote, "You see," Anya Sergeyevna continued, "you and I have made a mistake. We're both past our first youth, especially I. We have seen life. We are tired. We're both, why be falsely modest? Clever. At first we aroused each other's interest. Our curiosity was stirred, but then I became flat," Bazarov put in. You know that was not the cause of our misunderstanding, but be that as it may, we had no need of each other. That's the main thing. There was too much, how should I put it, similarity in us. We did not realize this immediately. Eugene Vasilievich, we have no power over, she began, but a gust of wind swooped down, set the leaves rustling, and bore her words away. "Of course you are free," Bazarov declared a little later. Nothing more could be distinguished. Their steps retreated. Everything was stilled. The next day, Bazarov blesses his young friend Arkady and departs.